had a platinum record on my wall before I was 26. I had a studio session with an artist whose name you absolutely know, and I produced 3 tracks on an album that sold over 2 million copies. I had a bank account that a year earlier I would not have believed was possible for someone like me. And I had a deal with people I did not fully understand, that I had agreed to without reading everything I should have read, because I was 24 years old and hungry, and someone had finally looked at me and said yes. I am going to tell you what that deal actually cost me. Not the version where everything works out. The real version. I grew up in Atlanta. Not the Atlanta you see in music videos. The other one. The one where people work night shifts and the grocery store is 40 minutes away, and you figure out pretty early that the life you want is not going to just happen to you. Music was the thing I had. From the time I was maybe 13, 14, I was making beats. Started with GarageBand on a school iPad I was technically not supposed to take home. Then moved to a cracked version of FL Studio on a laptop that overheated if you ran more than 4 tracks at once. I used to put it on a bag of frozen peas to keep it cool. I am not exaggerating. By 17, I was sending beats to artists on Instagram. Most of them never responded. Some of them responded and then disappeared after I sent the file. A couple of small placements happened. Nothing that changed anything. I moved to Los Angeles at 22. Classic story. I had a few $100s, a hard drive full of beats, and a cousin who let me sleep on his couch for the first 3 months. I started going to every open studio session I could find, every open mic, every industry mixer, every anything. I was not the most talented person in every room I walked into, but I was there. Every single time I was there. By 23, I had a few credits on independent projects. Nothing major, but my name was starting to appear on things. And more importantly, people were starting to recognize it. That is when the first call came. A manager I had met maybe twice reached out and said there was someone who wanted to hear my work. He did not say who. He said the meeting would be at a private studio in the hills and that I should bring a hard drive with my best 50 beats and not tell anyone where I was going. I thought the secrecy was just industry stuff. Labels do things quietly all the time. I did not read anything into it. I showed up. The studio was insane. I had been in some nice studios by that point, but this was a different category. Custom everything. Equipment I had only seen in YouTube documentaries. A view of the city through a wall of glass that made you feel like you were above the world looking down at it. The man who met me was not a label executive. He did not introduce himself that way. He said he was a curator. He said he worked with a collective of individuals who had significant interests in the music industry and in culture more broadly. He said they identified producers whose work had a specific quality that most people could not articulate, but that certain very discerning listeners could immediately recognize. He said my work had that quality. He played 3 of my beats back on a system that made them sound better than I had ever heard them sound. And he sat across from me and he watched me listen to my own music. And he smiled in a way that I now understand was calculated. He was watching me fall in love with the vision of what I could become. He was timing it. He said, "We can put you in rooms that most producers spend their entire careers trying to get into and never do. We can get your music to artists who will actually use it. We can make your name mean something." He said all he needed from me was a commitment to work exclusively with their collective for an initial period. He called it a partnership agreement. I asked how long the initial period was. He said it was flexible, dependent on the relationship. I should have pushed on that. I did not push on that. I said I was interested. He said he would be in touch. He was in touch the next morning. The agreement was not a standard music contract. I know what those look like. I had signed a couple of small ones by that point. This was different. It was long, longer than anything I had ever seen. Written in language that was precise in ways that made it hard to understand without a lawyer. I did not have a lawyer. I asked if I could take it home and have someone look at it, and the man, whose name I am going to call Raymond because that is not his name, said, "Of course. Take all the time you need." But he said it in a tone that communicated something different. Like the window was open right now and might not stay open. I took it home. I read it myself. The parts I understood seemed reasonable. Partnership, exclusivity, resource sharing, mutual benefit, confidentiality, standard-sounding things. The parts I did not understand, I told myself were just legal language that all contracts have. I signed it 3 days later. Within 2 weeks, I was working in that studio in the hills 4 days a week. I had a per diem. I had access to session musicians, to vocal talent, to engineers who had worked on records I had grown up listening to. Everything I had wanted was suddenly just there, available. Like someone had opened a door I had been pressing against for years. The first 6 months were the closest thing to pure I felt during the entire time I was involved with them. I was just making music. Good music. Music I was proud of. And it was going places. Real placements, real artists, real numbers. I did not ask a lot of questions about the mechanism behind it. How exactly did my beat end up on this album? Who made this particular call? Why did this artist, who had never heard of me 2 months ago, suddenly trust me with 3 slots on a project they had been working on for a year? I did not ask. I was getting what I wanted, and I told myself the details were not my business. That was the first mistake. Not the signing, the not asking. About 8 months in, Raymond had a different kind of conversation with me. Up to that point, our conversations had been about the work, about sound, about placement, about where my career was going. This conversation was about something else. He said the collective had been very pleased with what I had contributed so far. He said my music had a quality that resonated with their audience in ways that went beyond just entertainment. He said certain sounds, certain frequencies, certain emotional textures in music could do things to listeners that most producers never intentionally thought about. He said the collective was very intentional about those things. He said they wanted me to start being intentional about them too. I asked him what he meant specifically. He was careful about how he explained it. He did not use words like manipulation or programming. He used words like resonance and alignment and emotional architecture. He said certain combinations of sound, rhythm, and frequency, when structured correctly, could reliably produce specific emotional and psychological states in listeners. He said this was not a theory. He said it had been studied and refined for decades. He said the collective used music as one of several tools for what he called cultural shaping. I sat there and I did not say anything for probably a full minute. Then I asked, "Shaping toward what?" He said, "Compliance, comfort with certain ideas, discomfort with others, reduced critical thinking in specific contexts, increased emotional dependence on certain cultural figures." He said it very matter-of-factly, like he was describing a feature of a software update. I said, "You want me to put that in my music?" He said, "You already do. We have just been watching how you do it naturally. Now we want you to do it with intention." I went home that night and I could not eat. I sat in my apartment, the nice one they had arranged for me, and I thought about the millions of people who had heard the music I had made in the past 8 months. And I thought about what Raymond had just told me. And I tried to find a way to believe he was exaggerating or joking or testing me somehow. He was not exaggerating. He was not joking. And it was not a test. I want to be honest about what I did next because I think it is important, and I think it is the part of this story that is hardest to tell. I did not leave. I told myself I needed more information. I told myself I did not fully understand what he was describing. I told myself maybe there was a way to stay inside and not participate in that specific part of what they were doing. I told myself a lot of things that were all, at their core, ways of not doing the hard thing. The real reason I did not leave is simpler and less flattering. I was in. I had a platinum record. I had relationships with artists I had dreamed about working with since I was a teenager. I had a level of access and credibility in my industry that had taken me everything I had to build. And I was terrified that walking away from the collective would mean walking away from all of it. So I stayed. And I started doing what Raymond had described. Not fully, not immediately. I told myself I was doing a mild version of it, that I was not going as far as they wanted, that I was maintaining some line between what I would and would not do. But looking back, I understand that the line was moving the whole time, and I was moving with it. And I kept telling myself the line was still somewhere behind me, when it had long since passed beneath my feet. The music I was making started to change in ways I could hear but could not fully explain to anyone. Something was different in it. It was still technically good, maybe technically better than ever, but something was gone from it. Some quality that I now think of as mine. I produced 3 tracks during this period that went to #1. I am not going to tell you which ones, but you have heard them. And every time I hear them now, I feel a specific thing that I do not have a clean word for. Not pride. Something closer to shame mixed with grief. Over the next year, I learned more about what I was actually part of. Not because anyone sat me down and gave me a full explanation. It was incremental. A comment here, a reference there, something witnessed at a gathering that opened a door slightly. You piece it together. The collective was not just a music industry group. Music was one vertical. There were others. Finance, media, politics, tech. The people at the top of the collective were not executives or managers. They were something else. I was never close enough to the center to see clearly, but what I saw from where I was standing was enough. There were gatherings that went beyond business meetings, held in private locations, not always in this country. The people who attended were names that most people would recognize. The things that happened at those gatherings I am going to be careful about describing, because I do not want to say something I cannot back up. What I will say is that the purpose of those gatherings was not social, and it was not professional in any normal sense of the word. There were rituals. I will use that word and I will let you interpret it how you choose. I attended 3 of them over the course of about 18 months. I participated at a level I am ashamed of. I did it because I had been brought far enough inside that refusing felt like something I literally could not do without consequences I was not willing to face. And there was a hierarchy, a clear one. I was not at the bottom of it, but I was nowhere near the top. The people at the top were not visible. You heard about them the way you hear about something very far away, through the way people talked about them in rooms where they were not present. I never saw the person or people at the center of it. I do not know if I wanted to. There was a specific session I need to tell you about a year and a half into my involvement. I was in the studio working on a project for a major artist. The brief I had been given was detailed in ways that studio briefs usually are not. Specific tempos, specific key signatures, specific chord progressions, specific emotional targets for specific sections of the song. Not just here is the vibe, more like here is the architecture, and here is what each room needs to do to the person standing in it. I followed the brief. I am good at my job and I followed it completely. The track came out exactly as specified. And when I played it back alone in the studio after everyone else had left, something happened that I have never been able to fully explain to anyone. It did not sound like music to me. It sounded like a mechanism, like something with moving parts designed to produce a specific output. I could hear the intention behind every element, and the intention was not artistic. It was operational. I sat in that studio for a long time after that. I thought about all the people who were going to hear that track. All the people who were going to feel what it was designed to make them feel without knowing it was designed. And I thought about the 13-year-old version of me on a school iPad, making music because music was the most honest thing I knew how to do. Those 2 things could not exist in the same space in my mind. The kid I had been and the thing I had just made. That night I started thinking seriously about leaving. Not just thinking about it the way I had been, passively in the background. Seriously, like it was actually going to happen. Before I get to the leaving, I need to tell you what the ultimate price actually was, because I used those words in the title, and they deserve an honest answer. The price was not dramatic in the way you might expect. There was no single catastrophic moment where everything collapsed. It was quieter than that, and in some ways that makes it harder to describe. I lost my ear. That is the first thing. The thing that I had, the instinctive quality in my production, the part that made Raymond say what he said to me in that first meeting, it dulled. Gradually. Over a couple of years. I could still produce technically. I could execute a brief, hit a target, construct something competent. But the thing that had made my work mine was gone, or so buried under everything else that it might as well have been. I lost my relationships. My closest friend from before all of this, a guy I had grown up with, made music with for years. I let that friendship die because maintaining it required explaining things I could not explain. My family I kept at a careful distance for similar reasons. The only people I was close to during those years were other people inside the collective. And closeness inside the collective is not the same as actual closeness. It is more like proximity. You are near each other. You are not actually close. I lost my ability to enjoy music. This one sounds small, and it is not. Music was the reason for everything. It was the thing that had driven me out of Atlanta at 22 with a few $100s and a hard drive. And somewhere around year 2 of my involvement, I realized I had stopped being able to just listen to something and feel it. I would hear a song and immediately start analyzing it for what it was doing, what it was designed to do, whether it had the fingerprints of the kind of engineering I had been doing myself. It was like learning how a magic trick works, and then never being able to see the magic again. And I lost time. 2.5 years. That is what it ended up being. 2.5 years of being somebody I was not, making things I did not believe in, inside a structure that I did not consent to fully because I had not been told fully what I was consenting to. That is the ultimate price. Not one big dramatic thing. The slow erosion of the things that made you yourself. I had an advantage that I think made my exit slightly less brutal than it might have been otherwise, which is that I was never as deep inside as some people I knew there. There were people in the collective who were completely embedded, whose careers, identities, finances, personal relationships were all bound up in it in ways that would have made leaving not just difficult, but practically impossible without starting over from absolute zero. I was not at that level. I was valuable to them, but I was not irreplaceable, and I do not think they had invested in me to the degree that losing me would be a major disruption. That is a cold way to think about it, but it is probably what saved me. I started the process of stepping back by making myself less useful. I started missing deadlines, delivering work that was technically fine but lacked the specific quality they valued. I started being harder to reach. None of it was dramatic. I just gradually made myself a less attractive resource. There were conversations. Raymond had 3 separate talks with me about my output and my commitment over about a 4-month period. Each one was more direct than the last. The final one was the clearest he had ever been about what my continued participation was expected to look like, and what the alternative might mean for the career I had built. I sat in that conversation, and I thought about the track I had made that sounded like a mechanism. I thought about the 3-year-old kid and the school iPad. I thought about what it had felt like to make something just because I wanted to make it, and not because someone had given me a brief. I said I understood and needed a few weeks to get my head right. He said that was acceptable. Those few weeks I used to quietly move my finances, quietly reach back out to a few independent contacts I had maintained, and quietly prepare to walk away from everything the collective had provided. I did not tell anyone inside what I was doing. I did not tell anyone outside either, not yet. I just moved, carefully, methodically, like I was diffusing something. When I told Raymond I was stepping away, I was already mostly gone. The infrastructure of my life was already built somewhere else. He could not threaten me with the loss of things I had already replaced. His response was measured, almost polite. He said he was disappointed, and that he hoped I understood what I was leaving behind. He said the door would not be open again. I said I understood. I thanked him for his time, which looking back is a strange thing to say, but it was what came out. I left the meeting and drove to a parking structure, and sat in my car for about 40 minutes and did not move. Then I drove home, to the new place, the one I had found myself. And I made a beat. A bad one, honestly. Nothing like the things I had been making, but completely mine. I listened to it back and I cried. And it was the first time I had cried about music in a way that felt good. I have been out for about 3 years. I am working again, independently, on my own terms. My name still means something in certain circles, though not the circles it used to mean something in. I am okay with that trade. My ear came back. Not immediately. It took maybe a year of just making things for no one, posting nothing, sending nothing, just making, before I started to feel it return. That instinctive thing, the part that is mine. It is there, quieter than it was before, but there. I talk to my family again. My old friend and I are in contact. Not like before, not exactly, but working back towards something. Some things you cannot just pick up where they were. You have to build them again slightly differently. Here is what I know that I did not know at 24. The music industry has layers that most people in it never see. Most artists, most producers, most people working in it are just working. They are not connected to any of what I have described. They are just trying to make things and build careers, and they are fine. The industry is not entirely what I was part of. I want to be clear about that. But there is a layer that exists, that uses creative people, uses their talent and their ambition and their desperation as raw material. That is very good at identifying people at the exact moment when they are most likely to say yes without asking the right questions. That is patient and methodical and completely unbothered by the cost to the individual. I was one of those individuals. I got out. A lot of people do not. The thing I wish someone had told me is this: your talent is not a transaction. It is not something that can be upgraded through a deal. The hunger you feel, the drive, the thing that makes you stay up until 4 in the morning working on something that might not go anywhere. That is not a weakness that needs to be fixed by finding the right room. That is the thing itself. That is what you have. Do not let anyone tell you they can make it bigger by putting it inside something you do not fully understand. If you are in the music industry, or trying to get into it, or in any creative field where someone has shown up with an offer that sounds too well-timed, too perfectly suited to exactly what you need right now, I want you to hear this. Legitimate opportunity does not require secrecy from the people who love you. It does not require you to sign things you do not fully understand under time pressure. It does not come with a room in the hills and a system that makes your music sound better than it ever has, while someone watches your face and times exactly when to ask. Ask the questions. Every one of them. And if someone punishes you for asking, or makes you feel like asking means you do not deserve the opportunity, that is the answer. That is the whole answer right there. I made hits. I had a career that looked incredible from the outside. And I traded something for it that no number of platinum records is worth. I am telling you this because I wish someone had told me. Your gift belongs to you. Keep it that way.